we're going to be doing here is this little adult damsel fly. My smallmouth, I live in upstate New York. A lot of my little smallmouth streams, the bass don't look up very often. But there's certain hatches like dragonflies, damselflies. Once in a while, if we get a cicada or a hex hatch, they'll look up. So this little damsel is something that's really worked out well for me over the years. So we're going to make one of these guys. We're going to be using a couple of products that I've developed. These are part of the Cohen's Creatures lines. This is a damsel fly tail. They come white. It's an ultra suede. They're laser cut. You can color them any color you want using fabric markers or dyes to match your local hatches. And then this is my dubbing. It's been out for a long time now. This stuff's pretty wild. It's got all sorts of little, rubber legs and buggy looking stuff. So this is a size 6 hook. It's a nymph hook. We're just going to use some 210 flat wax denier, 210 denier flat wax nylon to get this going. I'm just going to lay a thread base down the whole hook. And then this is one of my tails that I dyed up already. There's a little tie-in tab at the very end of it. So I'm going to attach that to the back of the hook on top. And then this is medallion sheeting. I've got this olive color. It's kind of buggy looking. I just cut a little strip. I'm going to tie that on top. And then we're going to make a dubbing loop. So the way I'm going to do that is bring my thread out. I'm going to loop it back over the hook, make a wrap, and then I'm going to wrap around that dubbing loop. What that does is prevents my thread from migrating when I get ready to actually fill this with dubbing and twist it up. So I'm going to use a dubbing tool. And again, I'm going to grab some of that carp dub. And you don't need a lot of it. A little bit, get it in that loop. Just a little bit more. And then we're going to twist that up. And we're going to grab a little dubbing brush here. Brush that out so all those little rubber legs come out and we get this real nice buggy look. And then I'm going to twist this and dub this around. We're not going to go all the way up because we've got that deer hair head. So we need room for that. But this is going to give us that illusion of legs coming out from the bottom of the fly. I'm going to tie that off. Clip off the excess. I'm just going to brush that back with my fingers. And then I'm going to take my dubbing brush again, make that a little wild, and I'm going to comb it down on the sides so that all those rubber legs are facing down, or as many as I can get to face down. I'm going to bring my medallion sheeting over that. Pull it tight, and then we'll tie that down as well, and then clip off the excess. Now, to make these wings, this is calf tail. So I'm going to take a little bit of calf tail, which I have here, and I'm going to tie them to the side, each side of the hook shank. And it doesn't matter if they stick completely straight out like a real damsel fly. When this thing gets wet, it does all sorts of neat things in the water. It almost acts as a muddler anyway. So I'm going to take the shorter hairs and I'm going to brush them out. And I'm going to measure my wings. It doesn't have to be exact, but I'm going to make it about half the overall length of the body. So about like that, that's pretty good. I'm going to tie them butts forward, tips going back, just on one side, and then we'll grab another little clump for the other side. Same thing, we're going to measure that about halfway down the length of the hook, or the overall body length, I mean. And then we're going to attach that to the other side. Now, what I'm going to do to make those stand out from the hook just a little bit more, I'm going to bring a couple of wraps of thread behind each one of those. And that helps press them out just a little bit more from the body. Now, we're going to tie off that flat wax nylon. I'm going to add just a little drop of super glue over top of those wings, just for durability's sake. Smallmouth tend to beat flies up just a little bit. And then I'm going to switch over to a 200 denier gel spun thread. Gel spun is what you really want to use for any kind of deer hair work whatsoever. It's a slippery thread and it's very, very, very strong. So what we're going to do is make this head now. So I'm going to get my thread back on here, and I'm going to come right up and over top of that tie-in on those wings so that I can make a really nice collar with those deer hair tips right on top of that before we get into that muddler head. So this is belly hair from a deer. I'm going to cut a chunk and I'm just going to brush out all the short fibers and all the underfur. And I'm going to measure my collar. I want it to come back just a little bit. It doesn't, I mean, there's not an exact measurement, just kind of feel it out. I like the way that looks. So I'm going to tie that down right on top of where we tied those wings on. 2 loose wraps. I'm going to pinch underneath it, pull it down, and bring one more wrap through. And then all these butt ends, we're going to get rid of those. We're going to cut those right off. And now you've got a nice little collar that also helps keep those wings separated once this fly gets wet. I'm going to advance my thread. And now we're going to build that muddler style head. So once again, we're going to grab a nice chunk of deer hair, and we're only going to need one piece of hair, or one chunk of hair on the bottom and one chunk of hair on the top to fill this up. So once again, I cut a good chunk of hair, brush out all that short stuff. I'm going to even the butts up. And then these tips on here, we don't need these now because we've got our collar already. So I'm going to cut those off. It's going to make it easier for me to work my thread through once we need to put the top on. So I'm going to take my hair, 45 degrees. I'm going to bring my hand in front, 45 degrees back towards me. 2 loose wraps. I'm going to start to compress. And then I'm going to walk that entire clump of hair to the bottom of the hook. And then tighten it down. A little dab of head cement. And then we're going to match that clump on the bottom with another clump on the top. Now because I already have my collar here, I can cut the tips off of this top section. And all I'm concerned with is that rounded muddler head. So we'll even that up. Now this time, instead of holding it at an angle to the hook shank, we're going to hold it in line on top of that hook shank. Bring 2 wraps up and through. I'm going to pinch it and hold it in place. Compress my thread straight down. I'm going to bring 1 more wrap up and through to secure it. And then using my fugly packer, I'm just going to pack that hair back to make a nice dense head. Work that thread up and through nice and slow. I'm going to leave that there for a second. Now you're looking at this going, oh my God, how can I whip finish this? He's got a mess in front of the eye of that hook. So all my little material bags I save and I cut them up into these little squares. So I'm going to take this square and I'm going to cut a slit halfway down. I'm going to bring my thread back, I'm going to bring my thread through that slit, and I'm going to bring that around the eye of that hook. And I'm going to take the packer, push it back one more time, and then I'm going to hold that plastic, and now I've got all my deer hair under control. So now I can whip finish without being frustrated. Now, we pull that off. I'm going to take this out of the vise to trim. So you've got this giant mess up here, and we need to make it look like this. So how do we do that? We grab a razor, and you have to think about these things in basic shapes. So really, all that is a square that's been rounded off. So to get to that, we need to start off with a reference point. We need something to begin with. So I'm going to cut a nice flat belly on the head of this. Okay, we've got our first cut. That's one of 4 sides on a square, or well, yeah, 4, but we're talking cube more than square, so you got more, you got 6 sides, but we've got our reference. So now what I need to do is come up and make the next side. So I'm going to trim that front. I'm going to trim straight back on the top. Don't cut your collar off, leave those tips. On the sides, and now we've got our rough shape. So to get to this, we just need to start rounding and tightening and trimming. But if you can get to that square, you can get to that without a problem. Always think of it as basic shapes. I'm going to clear the eye on my hook. And then I'm just going to simply start to round things out and get my final shape. Remember, slow and steady wins the race when you're trimming deer hair. You can always cut more off, but you can't add any at this point. And if you don't think you suffer from any OCD, start trimming hair bugs. You're going to see how mentally ill you really are. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. So what I'm going to do is just use my scissors, and I got a couple of wild hairs under here. I'm just going to trim those out. And then I'm going to clean up the very top to make a nice smooth breaking point from my head and my collar. All right, so that's the finished head. And now all we got to do is put eyes on there. If you want eyes, it's perfectly fishable the way it is. I like to put eyes on most of my flies. So I'm just going to use these little dragon eyes, seducer eyes from Flyman Fishing Company. They're kind of buggy looking. I like the green. And these are 4mm. This Loctite gel is an amazing glue to hold eyes on flies. So I'm just going to use a little dab of it. Whoop, I lost my eye. Here, we'll do it again. that's it. Pretty simple, finished adult damsel. Can be fished as a muddler, can be fished as a dry. You can grease it, you can do whatever you want with it, put floating on it. Great little bug, lots of fun. Those creature tails will last you forever. Your fly will fall apart before the tails fall apart. And yeah.